Okay, so we're coming up on the last section of section 2. So we're still adding to the same power outline. But before we go on and add another power to our outline notes, let's look at what we've got so far. So we're looking at the rise of Sumer and how Sumer was an advanced society with the Sumerians. And they built city-states. We looked at those city-states and how they fought for power and farmland. Then we talked about the Akkadians, which were a separate group of people living to the north of the Sumerians, all inside of Mesopotamia, so in that land between the rivers. And they lived pretty peacefully until Sargon decided to take over. And now we come to a new subheading in our book that says religion shapes society. Now that's not a red subheading that we've been used to adding, so we're going to add that to our power outline notes as a power 2. Okay, so our last power 2 was an advanced society. So when you add this power 2, you want to be sure that you're lining up your power 2s. Okay, so religion shapes society. That's our power 2. And if I go back to my other power 2, I can see that I've got them indented about the same. So if mine were all on the same page, they would line up together. Okay? So let's read that. Religion was very important in Sumerian society. In fact, it played a role in nearly every aspect of life. In many ways, religion was the basis for all of Sumerian society. That word basis, if you think about what that means kind of like the foundation. You have to have a basis before you can build on that. So, for example, you have to learn your multiplication facts before you can do long division. Okay, that's a basis that you have to have. So religion was a basis. It was a foundation that all of the rest of society was built on. I think that's really what's important out of this paragraph. So we're going to add a point underneath our 2 here. We're going to say religion was the basis for society, or you can just put that religion was very important, or that everything else depended on their religion. Okay, but religion was the basis for the society. So if we go back, we see that we come to a new subheading called Sumerian religion. So let's add that. Now that's a red subheading. So that's not going to be directly under our religion shaped society. This is actually going to be a power 3. I'm still a fan of underlining my titles. You don't have to do that, but I am going to. So let's read this. The Sumerians practiced polytheism, the worship of many gods. Among the gods they worshipped were Enlil, lord of the air, Enki, god of wisdom, and Inanna, goddess of love and war. The sun and moon were represented by the gods Utu and Nanna. Each city-state considered one god to be its special protector. So we're not going to list all of these gods. Those would just be kind of minor details in this paragraph. But what we are going to say is that the Sumerians practiced polytheism, which is the worship of many gods. They did not just believe that there was one God. They believed that there was a God for kind of every different aspect of their life. Whoops. Let's continue reading. Okay, the Sumerians believed that their gods had enormous powers. Gods could bring good harvests or disastrous floods. They could bring illness, or they could bring good health and wealth. The Sumerians believed that success in life depended on pleasing the gods. Every Sumerian had to serve and worship the gods. I think that gods would definitely be one of the words that I choose here as being very important. And I would say enormous powers, because that's kind of what this is talking about, is that the gods had the power to do pretty much anything. They controlled basically everything. Okay, so Sumerians believed gods had enormous powers. Let's continue reading. Priests, or people who performed or led religious ceremonies, had great status in Sumer. People relied on them to help gain the gods' favor. Priests interpreted the wishes of the gods and made offerings to them. These offerings were made in temples, special buildings where priests performed their religious ceremonies. So priests obviously is very important out of this paragraph. They had great status in Sumer. That means that they were very important, okay? And they were basically really important because they were the ones that the Sumerians believed could communicate and talk with the gods. If the gods were unhappy, then the priest should know. And if there were a way to make the gods happy, then the priest would be able to tell the people. That was what they believed, okay? So it's important that you know that priests were very important in Sumer, had the ability to communicate with the gods. Okay? Let's move on. We got another subheading here. It says Sumerian social order. And it's a red subheading, so we're going to add that to our outlines as another Power 3. So go back and read. Because of their status, priests occupied a high level in Sumer's social hierarchy, or the division of society by rank or class. In fact, priests were just below kings. The kings of Sumer claimed that they had been chosen by the gods to rule. We talked about the social hierarchy before when we talked about our grapes chart. Remember the S in grapes are the things that you have to be a civilization or a social structure. We talked about in America, we have a social structure because we have classes of people. Our people are categorized into classes. So like there's an upper class, a middle class, a lower class. That's what a social hierarchy is, when people are grouped into classes. And so this paragraph is telling us that priests were just below kings in that social hierarchy. So we're going to add that to our chart. Kings were first, then priests. Let's keep reading. Below the priests were Sumer's skilled craftspeople, merchants, and traders. Trade had a great impact on Sumerian society. Traders traveled to faraway places and exchanged grain for gold, silver, copper, lumber, and precious stones. So right under the priests were the craftspeople, merchants, and traders, which were the people kind of who made and bought and sold and traded things. These people were important because they made things for the society, and they also got new things through trade for the society. So It's important that you know that those merchants and traders and craftspeople were kind of right under the kings and priests. That shows you how important trade and business were to the Sumerians. Then it says below traders, farmers, and laborers made up the large working class. Slaves were at the bottom of the social order. So we're going to go back to our chart, our power outlines here. Farmers and laborers were next. And then at the very bottom, we have slaves. So you can kind of tell what was really, really important to the Sumerians were obviously leadership and religion, because they've got kings and priests at the top. And it's interesting that farming, even though that made up a large part of their city-states, was really not considered a very respectable job. It was not valued, so farmers were at the very bottom, right before slaves. Slaves were valued even less. And as we look a little further, we can see that we have one more subheading in this section, and it's men and women in Sumer. So we're going to add one more subheading here. And it's going to be a power 3. We'll read that and see if we can find a good point to add to this. Sumerian men and women had different roles. In general, men held political power and made laws, while women took care of the home and children. Education was usually reserved for men, but some upper-class women were educated as well. Some educated women were priestesses in Sumer's temples. They helped shape Sumerian culture. One, and I don't even know how to pronounce that name, so I'm going to say E, the daughter of Sargon, wrote hymns to the goddess Inanna, the first known female writer in history. She wrote these verses, and I did not get a picture of it for the outline, but in your book you can go read those verses if you would like to. Basically, in this paragraph, we know that women were granted some rights, but not as many rights as men. Men definitely had more rights, especially politically. They could hold more government offices. So women had some rights, but not as many as men. Okay, real simple there. And so your power outline for section 2 should be completely done now. I do have a printout version that I've left with the sub, so if you feel like you want to just check yours and make sure that things are lined up and that it looks like it's supposed to, then you can check that with her. One thing I want to show you before the video ends is this picture out of your social studies book. I love this picture. I think it's so neat. This is a map of a city-state, pretty much, kind of a recreation of what a city-state would have looked like. And so you can see, kind of in the middle here, up at the top, is a giant temple. And so I think it's neat that that's the largest building in the city-state. You can definitely tell that religion was important. You've got these government buildings around that temple, and then you've got all these houses out here, houses and shops and things, and then we've got the walls all the way around the city-state. You can see those walls that were built for protection, and farmers actually lived in all of this land outside the walls. So we talked about how farmers weren't really valued, but you can see that they really weren't valued when you look at their position in the city-state in relation to some of the other important buildings and the temple and things like that. So I like this picture. I think it shows, kind of gives you a visual of what a city-state looked like and what was important to these people.